So, how do we know when economics really becomes a science? Well, it happens at that crucial moment when we take our elegant theories and we force them to meet real-world data, and we actually let the data talk back, maybe even challenge us. This is the whole game. Modern economics is built on this one really demanding idea. Theory has to meet evidence. And the discipline that makes that marriage possible? That's econometrics. Today, we're going to trace the story of how this science grew up, all through the lens of one of its highest honors, the Frisch Medal.
We're going to follow this story through 5 huge leaps forward. Each one was recognized by the Frisch Medal, and each one basically changed the rules of the game for the entire field, building on what came before. And this right here, this is the core principle. See, it's just not enough to have a brilliant idea on a blackboard. Econometricians are the ones who build the tools that let us ask the tough question. Does this beautiful theory actually describe the messy world we all live in? This is the fundamental challenge that ties together every single paper we're about to look at. Okay, so our story kicks off in 1978. This is the very first Frisch Medal, and it went to Angus Deaton. He decided to tackle one of the biggest, most basic questions of all. Could the core theories of economics, the ones cooked up in the abstract, actually hold up when you throw real-world data at them?
This really shows you the massive gap Deaton was trying to cross. I mean, on one side, you've got this clean, perfect theory of the rational consumer. And on the other side, well, that's what he was actually dealing with. 70 years of messy, chaotic, complicated data on how real people in the UK spent their money. The whole challenge was trying to build a bridge between these two worlds.
And this was no simple test. The question itself was just incredibly ambitious. Could this one theory hold up not just for a year or two, but across the insane turmoil of 2 world wars, the Great Depression, and massive social change? It was a truly monumental test of a cornerstone of economic thought. And here it is. This was the groundbreaking result. Yeah, there were some quirks, some anomalies, but by and large, Deaton found that the theory actually held up pretty well. Now, this wasn't just a simple confirmation, it was proof of concept. It was a demonstration that with rigorous, powerful methods, you could connect elegant theory to the chaos of reality. It set the standard for everything that came next.
Okay, so Deaton showed we can test our theories with real data. But what happens when that data is broken, when it's incomplete? Let's jump to our next major hurdle, which was tackled by the 1980 winners, Jerry Hausman and David Wise, the problem of missing data.
The specific beast they had to slay is something called attrition bias. And simply put, it's a nasty distortion that pops up when the people who leave your study aren't random. If the people who drop out are different in some important way from those who stay, your final results can be totally, completely wrong.
Hausman and Wise ran smack into this problem while looking at a huge social experiment. It was designed to study the effects of a guaranteed income. I mean, a hugely important study, but it had this giant hole in its data. People were just dropping out.
And the scale of this problem was just staggering. Over a third, more than 35% of the male-headed households just vanished from the dataset before the study was even finished. How on earth can you trust your results when you're missing info on 1 out of every 3 participants?
But here's the real kicker. The people dropping out weren't random. This shows that the control group, the folks who didn't get the guaranteed income, were way more likely to leave the study. This systematically poisons the data, making it impossible to get a true picture of the policy's effect without some kind of serious statistical fix.
The absolute genius of their paper wasn't just fixing this one experiment. They created a general-purpose toolkit. For the first time ever, researchers had a systematic way to check for this kind of bias and, crucially, a method to correct for it. This became an absolutely essential tool for literally thousands of other studies that track people over time.
All right, so we can handle messy data, we can even handle missing data. But what about modeling something we can't observe at all, like what people think is going to happen in the future? This was the next great challenge, and it was tackled by Lars Peter Hansen and Kenneth Singleton.
And this is the fundamental problem they were up against. So much of economics, from how you invest your money to what you buy at the store, it all depends on what you expect to happen tomorrow. But how do you build a scientific model of that? You can't exactly read minds.
Their breakthrough was this brilliant shift in perspective. They realized you don't have to observe the expectation itself. Instead, you can test the logical consequences, the footprints that must be left behind in the data if people are forming those expectations rationally.
This incredibly powerful insight led to one of the most important tools in all of modern econometrics, the generalized method of moments, or GMM. It basically unlocked entire new fields of research, especially in finance and macroeconomics. Think of it like a detective checking an alibi. The economic theory, the suspect, makes a very specific claim. It implies a core condition that has to be true if people are rational. Now that claim, that's the alibi. And it implies that certain clues out in the real world shouldn't have any relationship. They should be what we call orthogonal. GMM is the tool the detective uses to check the data, to check the crime scene. And if those clues are connected when they shouldn't be, well, the alibi doesn't hold up, and the theory gets thrown out.
So once these foundational tools like GMM were in place, economists could finally start tackling problems they'd only been able to dream about before. With these new abilities to test theory, fix bad data, model expectations, the floodgates just opened, and it led to this boom in what's called structural empiricism.
And all of a sudden, economists could build these incredibly detailed models that actually mirrored the complexity of real-world decisions. For example, a question like, when should a city manager replace a bus engine? That becomes a super complex structural model. You have to account for future maintenance costs, what you expect fuel prices to be, passenger demand. John Russ's prize-winning paper from 1992 did exactly that. This new toolkit allowed economists to build these rich models for everything from airline competition to international trade.
And that brings us right up to today, because the evolution didn't stop there. The cutting edge of econometrics is now pushing into even more ambitious territory, combining these powerful complex models with brand new forms of evidence.
This timeline really puts our whole journey into perspective, right? We started back in '78, just asking if our theories could even touch reality. Then, in the '80s, we forged the tools to deal with messy data and things we can't see. That led to the boom in these big structural models. And today, the real frontier is all about integrating those sophisticated models with powerful experimental data.
Just look at what's possible now. We have researchers modeling how skills develop in a child over their entire life. Others are using the division and reunification of Berlin as this massive natural experiment to understand how cities work. And just recently, the 2024 winners used a huge randomized experiment in Kenya, not just to see the effect of cash transfers on individuals, but to actually measure the ripple effects, the general equilibrium across the entire local economy. It's just a whole new level of ambition.
And this really brings us back to the central theme, the thread that connects every single paper we've looked at. Ultimately, the goal isn't just to find patterns or correlations in data, it's to understand why things happen, to identify the causal mechanisms that really drive our economic lives.
The story of the Frisch Medal is really this relentless quest to see the world more clearly, to measure what was once thought to be unmeasurable, and to hold our most cherished ideas accountable to the evidence. Which, of course, leaves us with one final thought. What's next? What are the invisible forces shaping our worlds right now that we haven't yet learned how to see?